Ready to go when you are, sir. Gentlemen, you all ready?
We ready? Yeah. All right, good morning. Welcome. I rushed over here. We had the Ooltewah Middle School graduation, so apologize a couple minutes late. Those young folks are, those young folks. Can you hear me now? Yeah, those young folks were excited, and we presented them some stuff over there. So great school, great leadership in that school, and you can really tell the difference in a school based on its principal. Firmly believe is that sets the culture for that school, and very blessed to have a great principal at Ooltewah Middle School. And of course, I can keep going on and on, but I won't. But we're here, I guess, to do a budget presentation. We're going to do the school system. So it's okay. Turn over to Finance Chair.
All right. Thank you, Chairman, and welcome, and thank you, Commissioners, who were able to make it. We may have a few more filter in as we go today. I only know of one for sure that said that he could not make it, so hopefully we'll get our other Commissioners in here as well. So we've got two presentations today. The school system will give their presentation, followed either immediately by the mayor or after a short break in between, followed by the mayor. These meetings are set up as presentation to the public only. These are not public comment meetings. These are presentations. This budget is just now being released, so everybody is getting it pretty much the same time. But over the next about 5 weeks, the commission will have opportunities to discuss it. There are opportunities for public comment at every one of our commission meetings related to the budget moving forward, but today is just presentation only so that we can hear from both executives of their departments on what they're proposing for the county in their realm. So with that, we are running a few minutes behind, so my apologies for that. Dr. Robertson, the mic is yours, sir. Your presentation is up first for the school system.
Thank you, Mr. Smith and Chairman Eversole, and all the commissioners for letting us be here. I want to, before we start, recognize board members that we've got. We've got several board members here. Mr. Larry Groen, Mr. Ben Connor, Mr. Steve Slater, and then our finance chair, Mr. Ben Doherty. I know that we've got a couple that'll probably be coming in a little bit late, but as Mr. Eversole said, we've got some promotions going on that I know people are taking part of. Want to thank each of you for being at graduations last week. That's a fun moment for us to kind of go into this conversation to see the outcomes that we're getting with the investments that we're making in kids. And so I appreciate you being there to support our students. Also to our team worked really hard on this budget. A number of them are here with me, so I want to publicly thank them for the work that they put into this budget. It was a long process, obviously a challenging one, but we feel like we've got a solid budget to present to you today. Real quickly, I want to run through our strategic plan and anchor us before we get to what is in your packet. This packet we sent to you on Friday. It has all the inserts from the budget. It has the budget narrative, has this presentation, and then linked to that was the entirety of our budget that we've had posted on our website since May 9th. So it's been public for everyone to view for quite a while now. But our just cause that all children will thrive and experience a future without limits. We talk a lot about our beliefs. The one that I think we should highlight today is that public education is the foundation of our community. I talk about our values as what drives our day-to-day work. You should see these values in everything that we're doing from day to day. And I think specifically in this budget process, we leaned on integrity and stewardship. And I think that you'll see that as we talk today. And finally, our commitments. We've been doing priority-based budgeting for about 5 years now. So this is not new to the majority of you, that every dollar we spend is connected to one of these 5 commitments. We talk about these commitments in action. I'm not going to go through each of these because you have them in front of you, but I do want to highlight a number of things that I think is really exceptional in the work that we've been doing. Second bullet here, that 90% of our teachers were rated effective. It's a far cry from where we were in 2016 when the Times Free Press highlighted the number of teachers that we had in places that weren't effective. And so we've increased that quite dramatically over the last number of years. Also, when you look at student achievement, $54 million more this past year in scholarships than in 23. And so that is a huge number that we got to highlight this past week at graduations. Talk about every student belongs. You've been able to celebrate another number of state champions, and now they're coming to you for state championship rings because you guys agreed to fund those. We've had more state champions in the last year than we've had in quite a long time in Hamilton County. And so we're excited about the connections that creates for kids. We talk about every school equipped. I always go to transportation. Transportation's been a struggle in this county for a number of years, but over the past 3 to 5 years, we've made a commitment to doing better, and you're seeing that in outcomes. 98% of our buses are on time, and this year we filled 100% of our routes. For a district our size, that is pretty incredible. Also, we're leading in terms of safety indicators in the Southeast. When you look at First Students' book of business, they point to us as one of the leaders in safety outcomes. You talk about every employee valued. We're retaining 90% of our teachers. That's across the board. And when we talk about first through second year teachers, the number is 91%. When we started this school year, over 99% of our student-facing positions were filled, which again, for a district our size, shows that the investment in our HR and the work that Dr. Brown and his staff are doing in talent is paying off. Then finally, you talk about every community served. We had a graduation rate of 93%. It's the highest graduation that we maybe have ever had in Hamilton County, but definitely the highest that we've had in the last 15 years. And so excited to share that number with you. Talk about this when we do this work well. These are the kids that we graduate. And I'll point out again that the indicators on this portrait of a graduate, there's only one that's really an academic indicator. It's academically thriving. Most of these are what you and I probably would have called soft skills. Sometimes we call them essential skills, but these are the skills that employers are looking for and that we're working to build, not just in high school. We actually have metrics that go all the way back into kindergarten. So when you talk about what it means for a kindergartner to be solutions oriented, we have indicators that can tell you what we're looking for all the way back to kindergarten. So you talk about this budget. I wanted to spend a few minutes here just making sure that we clear up some questions. I sent you guys a memo about 3 weeks ago to make sure that we're on the same page about this. ESSER funding ended in 2024. So we did not have ESSER funding in last year's budget. What we know is that we got about $140 million in ESSER funding, and you can see the breakdown of how that was spent. Nearly half of it was spent on student learning. The next highest was on facilities. We were able to put some money into Tyner. We were able to put some money into other buildings to make sure that they were up to code. We also know that we invested in about 229 full and part-time positions. Only 93 of those positions moved over into our budget as either a grant-funded position or a GFP-funded position. This budget year alone, we've cut over 130 positions. So we do not have ESSER positions that are creating budgetary struggles in this process. We also know that 2 years ago, we got TISA growth. It's a new funding formula, right, from BEP to TISA. And the impact of TISA was pretty significant for Hamilton County, about $67 million more dollars. As you recall, BEP, we are actually part of a lawsuit a number of years ago because BEP was not funding large urban districts the way that it should. And so this new TISA funding formula corrected some of the past issues with BEP. We invested the majority of that money, actually more of that money, straight into schools, into a new staffing model, into our strategic model, and also in salary increases. We cut about $22 million that year from central operations to make sure that we were pushing as much money directly to schools as possible. What happens there when we push more money to schools is that schools chose to invest mainly in people, right? And so the increase in staff mainly is happening at schools, and it's because we decided to push as many resources to schools as we could. This past year, we spent a lot of time, not just in surveys, not just in meetings, but going across the county, talking to different groups to get an idea of what they were looking for in this budget. This is just a visual that kind of shows you what each of those groups were interested in investing in. What I point out here is that you see a lot of commonality between the groups, whether you're talking about parents, whether you're talking about teachers, whether you're talking about our school board, but you see a lot of the same indicators that come up in these different groups. And it's something that we pressed on in this budget to make sure that we hit those. So we were making decisions. We prioritized making sure that we were, again, staffing schools appropriately, that we were giving access to resources to students, and that we were trying to protect working conditions for employees. We know that pay is something we need to continue to work on, and that is something that keeps our retention rates and our recruitment rates high, but we also know that working conditions matter, and pushing those resources to schools is an important part of that. Again, priority-based budgeting, whether we're talking today about our GP budget or you're talking about federal dollars, self-funded dollars, all of them have to be connected to one of our commitments in our budgeting process. So we look at revenues this year, and again, today we're talking about our operating revenue, which in total is just over $577 million. It's about $17 million more than what you saw last year. I want to point out a number, though. It's kind of boxed in about four columns down, the $279 million. That's our local property tax revenue, sales tax revenue, and then some other local revenue. That number is the same as what you saw last year. So we did not put growth dollars into that local operating revenue. And the reason that we did it is we were talking with our board, making sure that we are being conservative in this budget. We didn't want to see another year where the revenue wasn't coming in at what is proposed, right? And so that 279 is the same number that you saw last year. The 17 million, the vast majority of that is coming through TISA. And if you remember our conversations last year, this body elected to give us $5 million in one-time funding last year that allowed us to get our starting wages up to $50,000. What we're seeing in that 17 million is a return on that investment, because the state is expecting all the counties across Tennessee to get that starting wage up to $50,000. We were able to do it 2 years in advance. And so we're seeing additional revenue coming from TISA that really shows that investment from last year. This slide is one to kind of talk through how we got to a balanced budget. What we are spending more money in, those are the red arrows going up, and the places that we were able to save dollars in this budget. I point out in this slide that the majority of the red arrows are areas that we have very little wiggle room, like the trustee commissions, insurance and legal services. We don't have a lot of ability to affect those numbers. But the areas that you see going down, capital maintenance, textbook supplies, custodial services, are areas that we really pushed into this year to get to a balanced budget. You look at our positions, and again, you'll see this has been reduced. We cut at school-based staff by about 3%, cut central office by almost 4%. So cut central office by almost 11%. So almost a 4 times larger cut percentage-wise at central office. It was a reduction of almost $4 million at central office. But you see our total personnel across what we're calling school-based, that 4,600, and then centralized supports at the 387 positions. Pointing this out, we do have in this budget that was approved a recommendation to cut 0.5 position at every school. This is where principal will make a decision to reduce by a half position. If that goes through, that school-based total will be 4,609. So just trying to be transparent about that 35.5 position reduction. Again, principals will have discretion there of what that looks like in cutting that half position. So you talk about every student learns, and this is obviously our largest investment. It's about 61% of our total operating revenue. On the left, you will see areas that we have continued to invest in and those dollar amounts. So exceptional ed, we are investing $55 million. It's again, the same amount that we invested last year, which is the largest investment in the history of Hamilton County Schools into exceptional ed. You'll see the reductions on the right. So benchmark adjustments is a reduction of about $200,000. And then the 0.5 from every school is about a $2.8 million reduction. Talk about every student belongs. Again, this is our commitment to making sure that students are connected. They're connected to teachers, they're connected to each other, and connected to their community. This is about a 7% investment from our total operating budget. And you'll see the continued investment in school personalization staff, whether that's social workers, counselors, but also in athletic stipends and fine art stipends. We're expecting the state included in their budget, the governor included in their budget, the ability for SSOs to participate in that grant. They started with SRDs last year. This is a separate grant from that, but it's in the governor's budget. We're expecting with the number of SSOs that we have to hopefully get somewhere around $2 to $2.5 million from that grant that will help us continue to fund those SSOs that we have in schools across Hamilton County. Every school equipped, again, making sure that we're creating safe schools, that we're making sure that we are removing barriers as we make these investments. Every school equipped is about a 16% investment from our operating dollars. Of course, you see school safety. The largest investment here is transportation at $28 million. When you look at savings here, we removed capital maintenance by about $1 million. What we're going to lean on here is that $60 million that came in the form of that bond that we did 2 years ago. We've brought about $25 million in projects. Probably next month we'll bring you even more projects out of that, but we'll lean on that this year to make sure that our capital maintenance stays up to date. We removed Future Ready Transportation. It's about $800,000. I want to be clear here. This is Future Ready Transportation from one school to another. We only had about 18 kids participating in this, and so it just wasn't a good, efficient use of our money. The Future Ready Center, specifically Harrison Bay next year, and Future Ready Center at North River, where we're going from, say, Hickson to North River or from Ooltewah to Harrison Bay. We are continuing to do that. So this Future Ready Transportation is not that half-day transportation. It is where a kid was choosing to go from maybe Ooltewah High School to Soddy Daisy High School, and we had less than 20 kids participating in it. We're reducing some costs. Of course, you see there copier paper costs. We rebid our copier contract. We're pushing school-based subs back to schools. We made a decision about 4 years ago to pay for school-based PD through central operations. In years past, that was a cost that was covered by schools, meaning if you were doing professional development during the day and it was a school-based decision, the schools were required to pay for that. We're pushing that back to them, which is a reduction of about $700,000. And then central office reductions, already talked about some of the personnel reductions, but we found about another $1.3 to $1.5 million in reductions at central office. That literally was going line by line and what I refer to as like scraping lines, whether it was copiers, whether it was cell phone use, anything that we could, professional development, and we're able to get that total reduction up to $5.3 million. Every employee valued. And again, this is a huge investment. And you saw on the priorities line across the board that almost every group was pressing on our adult to student ratio, that we wanted to maintain that. We have continued to maintain that in this budget to where our student to adult ratio will be about 1 to 10. That's taking every adult in the building and dividing it by the total population. Our employee stipends are continuing to be there. You see benefits cost, $2,000 bonus for all of our employees. The state is picking up some of that. What the board decided to do is to pick up the rest, meaning, for example, employees that would not have gotten that $2,000 bonus, we picked that up in this balanced budget. We have made some adjustments to benefits. We're going to take some things out to bid. Our pharmaceuticals is one. We're going to make some adjustments on some of our plans to make sure that we're getting the best cost that we can. We know that especially healthcare benefits are going to continue to rise, and we've got to be aggressive in making sure that we're getting the best rates possible. We do have a $25 per month premium increase for our employees. That would be across the board for each plan. That's about $725,000 in savings. We have had conversations with HCA about possibly staggering that, meaning, would a family plan, instead of $25, maybe a family plan is $30 and then a single plan is only $20 more, but it'll be an average of about $25 per month, which savings of $725. We're adjusting stipends. And again, I mentioned earlier the cell phone modification, that those two combined will be about $750,000 in reductions. Every community served. I'm going to go through this one really quick because we haven't made any cuts there. This is our smallest investment, although you see some really important things. Our specialized programs, our graduation rate, one of the things that we believe why that has gone up so much is we've invested in programs like University High, Opportunity High, Collegiate High at Chattanooga State, those programs that really serve kids well and make sure they have a strong path towards graduation. Here's kind of a rundown of our final adjustments just to make it as clear and as plain as possible. We started out with about a $16 million deficit, and the majority of that we've talked about in the past is because revenue wasn't coming in, and then healthcare expenses have gone up significantly. Again, the central office reductions you see there is the longest, that staff and that line item. It's about $5.3 million. The half position at every school is about a $2.8 million. Benefits reduction, $2 million. Capital maintenance funds, $1 million. Eliminating Future Ready is $800,000. The increase in premiums is $720,000, and then the adjustment in stipend $635,000. The copier and paper cost is just over $300,000, and then the benchmarks reductions at $200,000. Cell phone modifications at $100,000, and then you see the SSO grant at the bottom that's budgeted just over $2 million, and that gets us to a balanced budget. I know I ran through that super quick. I always feel like it's more important for this body to have questions. Again, you have all of this information in an email that came to you on Friday. And for the public, the entirety of the budget has been posted since May 9th. Mr. Smith, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. Chairman?
I've got a quick question here, and we've got some lights on for some questions as well. When we received your budget that you sent Friday, we got this morning, a little bit after 8 o'clock. The way our email works, and hopefully we're in the process of getting that fixed. And I've seen the mayor pop in here. That's one of the reasons that we're trying to, I know Chief, that's one of the reasons we're trying to, if we could keep working on that email, that it comes instantly when somebody sends it to the district number. This is one of the reasons why, because we don't get it till Patricia comes in and forwards it. So we didn't get it till this morning. Now Mayor did send me a copy Saturday, and I was able to send it out to the commission yesterday, because it's hard for us to come in here and not have any time to review, what we're going to be talking about. But one question I've got on it is, when you give your budget here, you're comparing two things: last year's budget to this year's budget. And I know typically government, that's the way we've always done it. I'm going to ask that we change that in the future. And I know Lee is not here, but Lee, a couple of years ago, started doing something. Where's Lee at? There he is.
He's hiding in the back.
He's hiding in the back. He's not in his normal chair. Lee has created, for our request, a form that you actually see what we're spending. Because to me, it's important to know, if we're going to approve a budget, do you need it? Are you spending it? I think sometimes in government, we have a tendency to spend it because we got it, or spend all of it because we got it. And I'm not saying you guys necessarily, in government in general, we have a tendency to do that. So I think for us, it's important that when you look at the accounts, what's their trend? What has their expenditure been in that in the last I know Lee does it for the last, I guess it's 5 years. So it does, so we see what actually has been spent per fine line account for the last 5 years. So that way you look at peaks, and you look at trends, and that way it gives us a better opportunity to kind of.
Yeah, we're happy to do that.
But it's really, really eye-opening to it. But so with that, we'll got some lights. Commissioner Mackey.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Robertson, first of all, I want to say good morning to you and your board and staff. And I say that on behalf of this commission. We all welcome seeing you here. You started this morning. First of all, we are you're asking for over $500 million, $577,000 plus dollars. And then you stated what your commitments are, what your goals are, what you're trying to approve, what you're trying to achieve. Then you gave the results of your expenditures and kind of, I don't know, a generic question. If you were at Food City and a parent asked you, what are they getting for their dollar? How would you answer that?
Yeah, I would answer it that they're getting a public school experience that is improving dramatically, and that in a lot of areas is leading the state. I would also point out the fact that we are serving kids from every part of this community and providing options for them, whether you want to talk about the number of certifications. We had over close to 400 graduates last week that went through that have an industry certification or some type of work-based learning experience. It's going to allow them immediately to go into the workforce. We also, have more QuestBridge. It was over 100 that are receiving scholarships, like the QuestBridge scholarship that is nationally recognized, and one that I would put up against private schools in this area. So what I would tell them is that regardless of what your kid wants to do, if your kid wants to thrive and excel as a welder, we have that opportunity for them. If your kid wants to go to an Ivy League school, that opportunity is there for them. And so when this community commits to public education, we create those opportunities for them. I would also point out, this doesn't get out there as much, but had the opportunity to go to our Project Search graduation last week. It's our largest group of kids in Project Search. And if you don't know Project Search, it's transition for our students with disabilities into adulthood. And we've been doing it for 7 years now, which would have told you prior to that, we weren't doing a great job of transitioning our students with disabilities. But out of, I think it was 14 graduates, out of those 14 graduates, all but 2 already had job offers, which is pretty huge. So,
and as I ask questions, please know it's not in an adversarial, from an adversarial standpoint, but just for information. I bumped into one of your staff members, and like everyone else, you read the paper and it talk about the performance of the public schools. And one of your staff persons began to share with me that what was being measured was not what heretofore had been looked at. Can you explain that a bit? And maybe I need to.
yeah, you're gonna have to need more. I'm not sure what you mean when you say what's being measured is not what's
When
being
the
looked at.
state put out a report, what are they measuring? When they rank you, how do they, what is that based on?
Yeah, it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, what we in Hamilton County and what the state, the 2 main indicators they look at are academic growth and then academic achievement. So academic achievement, I would describe to as like the score that you get, right? Did you meet the set standard, and are you on track? Academic growth is looking at where we get a kid at the beginning of each year. And as our tremendous chief strategy officer illustrates this, she thinks about a track, right? And if you think about a 400-meter dash, some kids start at the starting line. Some actually are already halfway across, the track. Some are back halfway. We don't get kids that start at the exact same spot. And what growth does, it measures, regardless where you started on that track, did you make a full year's loop, right? Did you get it all the way around the track at least once? And so those are the two main ways that the state measures us in terms of academic performance. It's achievement and it's growth.
In terms of growth, when you look at Hamilton County Schools, where we start out, comparatively speaking, are we below the average of the state, at average, or above?
Yeah, you look at growth, we have done a much better job since 2019. 2019 was the first time in a number of years that we received a level 5, which is the highest ranking that you can get. We had a level 5 two years ago, had 1 year of level 1, or at a level 3 now. So level 3 is saying that you did what the state asked you to do.
Okay. Last two questions. The teachers. I think the chart you shared said 90% of the teachers were satisfied.
No, that was retention rate.
Okay.
85% is where we are with teacher satisfaction. And that's an area that we have worked with the PECA group. We've worked with our teachers cabinet that we're continuing to press on and work towards. It's not where we want to be. We've got a lot of work to do there. But we have seen growth from last year to this year in terms of, we define it as employee engagement, which is kind of an industry standard of looking at satisfaction.
Last item. The program where students can get a voucher and go to a private school. When it's all said and done, what is that going to do to public education?
You asking for my official response or my personal response? Professionally, I would say it's hard to tell, right? There are 20,000 vouchers that are out there, 10,000 that are for families of 4 that are under, I think the number is $173,000, which is pretty high in my opinion. So there's 20,000 of those out there. 10,000 of them are for families that are below that. The other 10,000 are for anyone. What I'm surprised about is almost every private school in this community has now decided to take those vouchers, which the kid could already be in the private school and apply for a voucher and get it. So what we know, just over 400 of our kids, we've been part of a voucher program for 2 years now with Shelby County and Metro Nashville, and just over 400 kids in our community were already taking part in that. But just over 70% of them never stepped foot in our public schools, whether that's kindergartners coming in or kids that were already in private schools. If you ask me my personal opinion, I think this is one of the greatest threats to public education in our nation. And it's not just Tennessee, it's across the country. And when you look at what it's doing to budgets in places like Arizona, it has a huge potential not just to hurt public education, but to hurt our financial standing as a state and our ability to do things that we have kind of held our hats on. When you budget something at 300 million and it comes in a year later at $1 billion, which has happened in at least 2 other states, that's a huge problem. What I think it also does is creates a scenario where, just to be quite honest, we're trying to segregate. We've been talking about segregated schools. This is going to create even bigger more issues there. But what we have a responsibility to do, and my professional answer is that we have a responsibility to compete. And what we are going to do is compete. And what we know is that a public school system, we provide really high quality opportunities for kids, and we provide opportunities that no private school in this area can offer to a kid.
Yeah, you said it at the outset, that the foundation of American life is public schools, and the voucher program is a threat to public schools. And so what would you say to us to help you and the school system save the public schools?
Well, I've said this a number of times, and I think that as a community, we've got to come together. And that's not just this body. It's not just our school board. I think it's the municipalities in this area. I think it's the city and city of Chattanooga come together and have an honest conversation without pointing fingers at each other about what we want from a public school system. What you guys can do is what you often do. You're doing it last week at graduations to show your not just support through finances, but as Mr. Eversole was saying, he's at Ooltewah Middle this morning. You know, what he said about the leader, Ms. Short at Ooltewah Middle, is something that money can't buy. It provides, you know, name recognition, a boost to Ooltewah Middle in that community because his voice holds water in Ooltewah. And so we want your support, not just from a financial standpoint and a vote, but to continue to advocate for the things that we do as a system.
Dr. Robertson, I will be an advocate for you and the school system. And I really appreciate you being honest when you talked about race as it relates to the schools and what's taking place. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Beck?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Robinson, I've always been a supporter of the school system. You know, I thank you for what you all do. And I would say that the biggest portion of you all do what you're supposed to, what you're being paid to do. For the taxpayers paying you for. But let's keep in mind that you're only 1/3 of the triad of full human development. And all you're there for is to present the facts, really, to provide the training. But in some cases, kids may not even want to be trained or developed, but they have to come to school. So you're being teachers and administrators, you're being exposed to all of that as well. Unless a child has principles and values in place, they can develop. When you present the facts to them, they can develop into a solid citizen. So I've always been fully supportive of the school system, and I will continue to be supportive of this budget, even though in my heart of hearts, I believe if I pull 10 students, 10 graduates together and ask them to read at grade level, I don't think they could do that. But that wouldn't be your fault. It takes a home and the church to prepare that kid for what you have for them when they get to you. So thank you for what you do. You do what the taxpayers want you to do. And in some cases, you provide discipline, all of the other stuff the parents are supposed to be doing. So I understand that. So that's why I want to always support what's going on with the school system. And thank you for this budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Highlander?
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Robertson, school board, staff, I very much appreciate what you all do. As I think Chairman Eversole has already told you, several of us had school commitments today. I had one at 9, one at 1, and another one at 6 today. I'll probably have to leave a little early, but it's an honor to do that. I saw my 8th grader graduate from Hunter Middle and are promoted. I'll see a 5th grader promote from Snow Hill, and then I'll be at Wallace Smith after that. But the mayor and I were at Hunter, and the mayor gave a good talk, and I appreciate that. did a good job there. But one question I had, and I'm sure I probably spent more time in Hamilton County schools than anyone here. Now, Mr. Shipley and I talked about who took the longest to get out, but it took me about 70 years to graduate, I think, or 60. But at any rate, I very much appreciate what you do. The budget that you have put up for us, I'm concerned, how will that affect the pupil-teacher ratio, or will it? I mean,
We protected that, and it's going to be about 1 to 10. Now, if the 0.5 goes away, that'll, at every school, that'll raise it a bit, but it won't raise it much. I mean, that's, again, to that slide that showed what each of the groups were interested in, that adult to student ratio continued to come up. And so it's about 1 to 10. The student, if you just do it student to teacher, it's about 1 to 20, something like that.
that's across the system?
Yes.
This is classroom teacher?
Yes,
to
sir.
Student 1 to 20? Okay. I think you and I have talked that I certainly hope in the lower grades, the lower the possible, the
Right,
lower
right.
you can get it, the better
Well,
off.
and you know, it's better than anybody at the high
Right.
school. You're going to have some classes that maybe have 28 or
Right,
30,
sure.
but then even there, some that I talk about all the time. Always Algebra 1, I wanted to be as low as possible.
Right.
And even though I'm a history teacher and you are too, that world history class was, 30, 32 or 33,
You and I could enthrall them, couldn't we? So, get a lot done. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And also, Dr. Mackey at the collegiate level, my goodness.
He would put us to shame.
So, same thing, he could enthrall, he even enthralled some of the board members up here with his history. Thank you.
Commissioner Baker?
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Thanks for your presentation. I think I was reading where of those 20,000 vouchers, 33,000 applied. Is that?
Just over 30 is what I saw.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to thank the school board members for working hard and very diligently on bringing us a balanced budget. I just want to reiterate what Commissioner Eversole said, that I'd like to look at the 5-year trends. Just it gives me a better feel. We have not only on our tablet, but I asked at least in the summation to print them out so that I can look at trends throughout the county. That will help me make better decisions. But I thank you for the presentation, and I thank the school board members for their hard work.
Thank you.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Superintendent,
Yes, sir.
thank you, sir, for being here. Thank you for bringing us a balanced budget. I wish it was discussed earlier in the year without gaslighting the community, but we got here. Thank you to all the school board members. Thank you to my school board member that's here. Thank you for your staff as well. I appreciate you all, what you do every day. I actually have a couple questions. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, sir.
the TISA funds that you got, what was put in this year's budget that you're projecting to get more? Was it 10 million or?
About 17 million.
17 million? I heard both numbers and I haven't seen, so 17 million more, right? So that takes you to right at $100 million of TISA funds, is that right?
You're over the last 3 years?
Yeah.
I think it'll be closer to 90, but I don't know that number off the top of my
90
head.
to 100. It's a lot of new revenue.
Right. And again, as recall, TISA was correcting past trends of underfunding
Yeah.
large urban districts. And
Yeah.
so, the intent of that goes back a number of years, and has allowed us to push those resources directly to schools.
Yeah, I totally appreciate the state and our state delegates, but the state putting that together and correcting that huge, I don't call it a mistake, but a huge misnomer for all of our schools in Hamilton County. With the new revenue that you put in here as far as new people, you didn't say new teachers, and I applaud you for your teacher retention rate. And the 2 high schools that I participated with for graduation, Lookout Valley Small, that's where I was at the middle school this morning. But still, it's 100% graduation rate. And Howard went from 93 to 95.2 graduation rate. Man, that was so exciting
Yes.
Saturdays.
Huge.
Yeah, huge. So yeah, there's a lot of good things happening. But how many of those how many of those new positions that you put in the budget after you received the TISA funds? I've heard 600, 700, 800. I mean, how many new people have you put on?
We would have to go back and look. I think it's closer to 250. And the majority of those are school-based. Again, as we push resources to schools, and you look at strategic funding, schools are investing more in people than they are anything else. In terms of central operations, we've reduced central operations significantly. And so that number would be lower.
And then Carter came up here and presented to us for our budget, and they talked about partnering with you all. Can you explain that a little better?
So one of the things that we're in early talks about, is, you know, I may get the exact name, East 3rd Street. I think that's East 3rd, that runs right in front of CSAS in between UTC, Erlanger's right there. That is a very challenging stretch of road for us. We used to be able to allow parents to park on the other side of East 3rd in the UTC parking lot, but starting last year, they no longer allowed us to do that. They're about to start construction. And so in partnership with the city, we've been sending 3 of our buses down to Warner Park, and they run at 8:15, 8:30, and 8:40, so parents can go and basically drop their kid off, and instead of getting in all that traffic, you were sending 3 buses full of kids there, and then in the afternoons, bringing them back to that spot. So the initial thing that we're looking at, we'll slow walk into this. I think we're going to start out by trying to run one of our buses, but then CARTA starts and ends their routes right there. And so looking at, instead of using 3 of our buses, using one of our buses and then staggering the CARTA buses to run kids to CSAS in the morning and back in the afternoon. That's the initial place that we're looking at. Now, we've got to have community meetings with parents at CSAS. We're going to do some things this summer to, and we haven't put this out to them, so we'll be doing that shortly, but inviting them to come, you know, ride the bus with us, and talk to Charles about setting those up just to make sure that we've got buy-in. And if that goes well, then we think there are other areas that we could extend even further.
Would there be savings to the school system?
There's 3 buses. So off the top of my head, if you think about adding a route and we had to add those routes, it'll save us probably $150,000 to $200,000.
Last and final, I guess it's really a statement more than a question to the school board that are here in the audience and everybody that worked on this budget. Thank you. Thank you for lack of a better word, I guess, holding the feet to the fire, for doing your job. Thank you. This is the first time I've ever seen a school board group that got this involved in the budgeting process that did what they did this time. Warning, next year, there will, I don't foresee, I can't speak for my colleagues, I can't speak for the mayor, but I don't see a tax increase next year. Very busy year, but I don't foresee a tax increase next year. I know you all begin starting on your budget early. Don't stop. Don't stop after you get done with this budget. Don't stop. Keep doing what you're doing and get ready for next year. Next year is going to be another tough year. We don't know that the growth will be there. If it is, and you've done the hard work already, then wonderful. We've been able to position ourselves in a better place to receive that money. But if you keep doing what you're doing now, and we haven't received any more money in growth than what we maybe anticipate, then we're ready for it. So we're not gaslighting the county, making everybody upset about something that could possibly happen that didn't happen. So prepare for next year. It's going to be probably more of the same this year. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Okay, Commissioner Shipley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. I want to kind of follow up with a thank you to everyone. And I know you worked hard. I followed this. I want to thank you for all the hate mail I got during it.
I can promise you ours was more.
But seriously, y'all did a great job. And you brought to us what we needed. And we appreciate it. I do appreciate it.
Hey, Commissioner Smith.
Chair. Dr. Robertson, I mean, you've heard several of us say thank you, and I'm going to echo that aspect of it to yourself, to your staff. I know it's hard to go through these, and just this summary is rather in-depth. Everything behind it is immensely in-depth. So thank you for that. Thank you to every one of the school board members that sat through these meetings trying to work through how this budget was going to come out and the really tough votes. You make up about 65% of our budget, our entire budget. And I get more than 65% of emails and phone calls are related to this budget or this portion of the budget. So I can only imagine the amount that the school board members are receiving, that you're receiving as a school system. And to be able to work through that and still bring a balanced budget is much appreciated. I know how difficult it is. So thank you in that. I'd want to touch on one thing. Commissioner Mackey did mention this, and I've heard it for years, I dare say decades, right? Where you've got taxpayers that just get these new assessments. They think their taxes are going to go through the roof. And then we hear a lot of the conversation about school cuts and, needing more funding for schools, and people's minds, immediately start to go there when it comes to tax increases. And I heard a lot of, over the years, but especially now, you have people that don't have kids in schools. Why am I paying, why are my taxes going to pay for schools? I don't have any kids in schools. And kind of piggybacking on what Commissioner Mackey was saying about why is it important? And I've answered, that question for years, which is, if you're educated, whether it's workforce or just people that live here, build a stronger economy, there's no question what has the biggest impact in your local economy. So if you want to live in a devastated, poor community, that tends to be, unfortunately, those that didn't have the opportunity for education. I also say that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my feel has been over the years, those that we educate higher have greater opportunity to leave our community for other opportunities. Those that unfortunately don't have the opportunity, less educated, tend to stay because they've got more of a support system already in place, and it makes it difficult for them to leave. So if the larger number of our population tends to be those that didn't have the opportunity or the access to education, then you end up at that situation where it's harder to make enough money to continue to build the economy, which supports everybody. So I say all that to say I understand the struggle as well, and I understand the question coming from Commissioner Mackey, because I get it as well, and that's how I try to explain it. And that is what you're doing. So my question falls on the end of that. We've talked about 100% graduate, which is amazing, right? We've talked about the strong leaders that we have in our school systems and how the budget is arranged. What about post-secondary? How do you feel that this 100% grad rate, are they ready to move into college? Are they getting good enough scores on their ACTs to even get in? I know straight A students that couldn't get into UT, which used to be the dream of every Hamilton County school student, right? Or at least most of them. And it's getting harder and harder to get into some of those institutions. Where do you feel that the efforts being put into Hamilton County are allowing our graduates, regardless of the high school, to be able to enter into that post-second, if that's their choice? It's not for everybody, but if it is their choice, how do you feel that we're ranking?
Yeah, I would start by saying we have intentionally created a system that allows multiple pathways without taking any of them off the table. And what I mean by that is I don't think, and we as a team, I think our board even agrees with this, that every one of our graduates should be going to college. We started in early 2000s, a single pathway. That is not a good way to operate a large system. And so I will push on, the work that we're doing with this body and with our board around the Future Ready centers, whether it's the one North River, Harrison Bay, Franklin Roberts, that's going to be downtown. That is a game changer for our community and for our kids if we do it well and if we do it the right way. And that doesn't mean that kids have to go to college. Now, can they? Yeah, 100%. So we're pushing there to make sure that we're providing those opportunities and doing it at a level that leads to a thriving wage. What I think is going to be really important at Franklin Roberts is when we build out those pathways, is that we're building out pathways within the purview of what the business community needs, and not just putting something there to put it there. We need to link it to jobs, link it to work-based learning, and make sure that that is available. When you talk about our graduation rate, 70% of our kids that are graduating are post-secondary ready, which is huge. And that's, again, not necessarily going straight to college. That could be going to Chattanooga State, then to a 4-year. That could be going into the workforce. But for 70% of our kids to be able to say they are post-secondary ready is a huge improvement for us as a district. I think when you talk about the entirety of our 3,300 graduates this year, is we've got to make sure we've got a pathway for each and every one of them. And that's why I mentioned Project Search, because I wanted you guys to know about that. Like, we've got a lot of kids with disabilities that we should be pushing for them to do more. They can do more. We should expect more of them, right? But we've got to provide them that pathway. UTK and colleges like that, they are getting harder to get into and more challenging. What we, I think, have to do a better job of at the high school level, and we've done this with our college and career advisors that we invested in a couple of years ago, is make sure that kids know what options are out there. I only went on a couple of school visits as a senior. We need kids that are going to a lot, and we need college career advisors that know the kids and can say, hey, for Ken, UTK may not be the spot. Have you ever been to Tennessee Tech, right? Have you ever gone to Tennessee State, and making sure that the options are available? But I would point to the continuum of options that we have for kids, and then go back to that 70% that are post-secondary ready is a huge, huge win for this community.
Just really quick to touch on that, we're at 70% now, and you said we're better.
Yep.
How do you have a comparison to a certain number of years ago where we were, and how much
It's more
improvement's
than
been made?
doubled. I can't remember what, if it's, we'll get it.
I'm just
to you, but-
curious, because I mean, it's part of the story,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah, we'll get it to you, but it's increased significantly.
thank you, Dr. Robertson. And thank you to all the school board members again for all your hard work. I know how difficult this was.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Dr. Robertson, thank you for the presentation. I'm sorry I was a little late.
No, you're good.
I may have missed some of this, but I'm sure we'll have opportunity to talk again. How much growth money has Hamilton County held from Hamilton County schools over the last couple of years?
So if you go back 2 years ago, that's $6 million in growth that we put in the bond I mentioned that earlier, is what we're using to help with this capital maintenance. And I mean, the $5 million that was one-time money, I guess you could quantify that as growth money. So, I mean, if you took those two together, $11 million.
It's $11 million. That'd go a long way to pay teachers, wouldn't it?
I would. I mean, you can look at $11 million multiple ways in terms of what it would look like for teachers. And when you talk about a step increase, we estimate somewhere around 4 to 4.5. You talk about 1% raise, estimate somewhere about 4 to 4.5 million. So, I mean, you look at 2.5% raise, a step increase, and a 1.5% raise, something like that.
Be a lot more than what we got for them this year.
Yeah, in this budget, we've kind of taken advantage of the $2,000 coming from the state that will, and with the board agreeing to pay $2,000 to every employee, you're looking at a $2,000 one-time bonus for our employees, which we're happy and fortunate to be able to do that. We obviously wish we could do more. I get asked all the time. I thought Mr. Graham was going there of like, what is the next thing? Like what is the next thing that we need to invest in? And sometimes people don't like my answer. I don't think there is a shiny thing. I think that we have the base and the foundation of the system over the last 8 years that we need, and we need to continue to invest in our people. And when I say in our people, like if we were to come and ask for money, it would go towards wages. The vast majority of it would be going towards making sure that we are paying our teachers, our secretaries, our cafeteria workers, what we think is a competitive wage.
Sure. The one-time money is great. And I'm glad that the school board approved that for all staff. I think that's really important. It takes all personnel to make the schools function. All those positions, both, certified and classified, are critically important to the operations of the school. And obviously, we need to invest more in facilities. The maintenance has gotten out of hand. There for a while, 10 years or so, we were talking about, the plan of reducing rooftops to rid us of deferred maintenance and create efficiencies so that we can better invest into the classrooms. But it always came back to investing more so into the classroom. And that being teachers, supplies, what have you. The 250 new positions with TISA, that sounds like a massive number. That's like 3 positions per school. It's not massive. But when you put it, that 250, when you say 250, it sounds like this big, number. Oh my God, 250 people. 3 positions per school, which is great. It goes a long way to help. But it's not just some astronomical number. And I may be a little disheveled here in my thought process and my line of speaking, but I feel like we're like off base a little bit. Like we've gotten off track with our strategic planning. We're adding, and apparently we're taking a couple schools offline. Plan to. Then we're going to add another one. So it kind of takes away that. Downtown, we're adding a school downtown. What do we have any ideas to what the cost of that will be operationally?
I've got, I don't have it in front of me. I can get that to you. It's essentially going to be people, but I can get that to you. And it looks like probably a phased approach because of what it's going to take to get that building ready, that it would hit a smaller amount next August and then a larger amount in August of 27. I would contend with you. I understand because of we haven't had as many public conversations about facilities in the last 9 months as we had in the previous 9 months, which we're probably all grateful for. But I don't think that we've gotten off base in terms of we're still pushing towards that, right? And that 200 million that we're doing the projects coming up will continue to address rooftops, address the number of schools that we have, and address deferred maintenance.
I think, at the end of the day, all of this, it comes back to me. It's like we've got to address these facilities, and we have to. As more and more students leave public schools to publicly funded private schools, that's something else we have to contend with. I mean, it's even more of an issue. I know the state of Tennessee is kind of following that Florida model. I believe the state of Florida will spend over $2 billion this year on vouchers for private schools with public dollars. That's what we have to look forward to. That's what we're looking forward to. If you're paying attention and you care about our public schools, that's what we need to be looking at. That's going to be even more challenging. And, unfortunately, we like to see these big, it's fortunate, it's unfortunate. We need to build schools, but they need to be safe. They need to be modern. You want families to feel comfortable dropping their kids off in these schools. You want to have facilities that accommodate, modern practices and that are comfortable for teachers to work in. But, I feel, and I've said this before, that it seems like we're asking teachers oftentimes to carry that burden by taking some of this growth money that historically would go to operations and put it into these facilities. And to me, that it just doesn't feel right. So all I'm really getting at here is that we've got the proliferation of private school vouchers, We have massive facility needs. Growth is slowing. We have not been really aggressive with recruiting business, right? And developing housing in a lot of areas and infrastructure to support that. The pinch is coming. Folks are already talking about, no revenue, but no new revenue. We got to figure out a way to support our teachers. And I don't know what that is, but the way that the winds are blowing in this room, it does not feel advantageous. And that is really concerning to me. So I would like to see some more conversation about that in an effort to support our teachers. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Sharp, in your packet on the left, there's some one-pagers, and I forgot this one's in here. So it's a breakdown of estimating at Franklin Roberts Center when it's fully operational, 450 kids, and estimated cost today's dollar. That may change obviously down the road, but to just over 1.9 million. Yes, sir.
Okay, we're over an hour. We asked them to come in and give us an hour presentation. So I've got a couple of lights. So Commissioner Baker, you something real quick?
Yeah, just, is there any reason we can't get that spreadsheet, the 5-year trends by Friday?
I try not to speak publicly, but we gave you one a few months ago. We'll have to dig it up. It was
Did it include
requested.
this budget?
It doesn't include this
I'd
one.
like it to
Includes
include this
FY
budget.
25. Yeah.
Yeah, if we could see 20 to 25 actual and 26 budget, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Highland?
Very briefly, I have been looking at the depth of this budget that you guys put together. And Mary Ellen, I tell you what, gives me a headache to try and do it. But I'm not a math guy. I'm a history guy like Dr. Robertson. But I think about what all you've done, ma'am, and Lee Browner and his team. They have put so many hours in. And I know you have too. And whether we all agree on every single expenditure or not, both of your teams, Lee and Mary Ellen, both of you have done so much that I just can't tell you how much I appreciate the effort that you've done. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Robertson, I've got a couple of things real quick. Apologize for keeping you over and appreciate you and your team staying. I'm looking at your expenditures, charter school transfers, up a little over $2.1 million. What is driving that?
It's $2.1 million more. I think the total is closer to 40 million.
That's
So it's-
40 million, 782.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. We've got new charters that came in that we're expanding. So they're adding grade levels every year. And so every kid that, if they've got a class of 50, that's 50 more kids that we have to send dollars to that charter school. That's the main one. We did have a couple that applied that were not approved this year that may come back. We haven't seen that yet. And so that could add some more if that occurs.
Insurance and legal is up quite a bit. It's 6 million versus 4 million. So it's a $2 million increase.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is obviously it's not just our risk factors, but it's everybody's risk factors. So when you see
I'm just
Hurricane
asking about
Helene,
yours because this is your budget, so.
I understand, but when a major event like Hurricane Helene happens in the Northeast, it's not just that part of the state that's paying higher insurance premiums. I mean, it comes down to us, and you're seeing insurance premiums.
It seems high. I don't
increase.
think that insurance would go up that much in 1 year.
It's not just insurance. I'm just giving you an example of what's in that line. We'll send you a complete breakdown that's, point you to the page in the budget of what it is.
And then I was noticing on the one pager that's in our book, there's a lot of other stuff in here, like other student support. That's like $28.6 million. What is other student support for $28.6 million?
Where are you pointing to?
This is the one that Lee put together for us, our budget book.
Is it? Yeah, I don't have that unless it's something that we gave to Lee. I'm not
Find,
sure.
find out what that is, because there's also another other on here in this other uses, which is operating transfers, charter school, so forth, is up, and it's almost $41 million. So I think,
You're talking about the transfer to charters being
well,
41
it
million?
says other uses, and then it's got a lot of definitions under it. Here's what I would recommend. If there's an other, it should be a minimal expenditure, but when you've got an other and it's like 20, 30, and $40 million, that's not an other to me.
I think that we're required to use those org functions that say that. That's not our choice. That's a state mandated thing. So we can give you a breakdown of what's under them, but
Yeah.
those are state functions that we have to use.
Like there's total other school funds is up 26%, which is,
I'll be happy to look into that and get it to you,
It's
but
just-
we have to
it's
use the school
confusing.
funds.
yeah.
I understand. So part of what's confusing is, our budget, and you said it's 65%, our budget goes all the way down into every school. So when a band raises $2,000, that's got to go somewhere in this, and it rolls up into one function, right? It gets super complicated. What I will say is that, from a transparency standpoint, every version that we've presented the day after we presented it to the board, it's been made public, right? And every single page of this document, every time it gets changed, gets made public. And I can assure you, we've scraped through each of these lines to make sure that we brought a balanced budget.
And I think you hit the magic word there is transparency, because I think our community, our citizens deserve being transparent. And I've said this all along, is one of the things to stand on is being totally transparent in everything we do and why we do it. And when you get on budgets and you're talking about, because it's not our money, it's taxpayers' money. And when you see that other line, and while I will say over 90% don't look at it, but the few that do look at it, I think they deserve an answer for it being on that. So that's.
Yeah, it's there. You just have to dig into it. And again, we presented it. What I will say, I mean, someone mentioned earlier, this board, our school board pressing us on this year, they've challenged us and required us to be transparent. It's the most transparent budget I've been involved in since, coming to central office in 2016. Everything has been posted. We put one pagers out anytime a question's been asked, and it's been accessible to the public since day one.
Okay. Appreciate that. And another thing is, I've said this from the beginning, is during these tough times, I know the school board, thank you for what you all did in helping look and approve this budget. I was looking at the chairman back there, and he caught me off guard and asked if he could come out from underneath the couch because I shamed him under the couch when I said, shame on you. So my apologies, Chairman. But I do believe fully that we have a responsibility to those classrooms. That's our number one responsibility, period. And I think my exact phrase was, we need to be careful where the rubber meets the road, and that's in the classrooms where it's in front of the students. That's where we need to make sure we continue to invest, is in those classrooms. And when you look at what you all did as far as some of the central office reductions, for me, it was kind of concerning, because if you look at some of the school systems in our state that are much smaller or much larger, using a much smaller amount from their central office, use those as guidelines. Those are things to kind of help us. I know coming from the business world, you always look at your competition and what can you learn from them to put into your tool chest, toolbox to help make you more effective. So I would challenge to continue to look at those things, because you know what? A lot of times the best answers are not within. A lot of times the best answers to get the best results come from outside. So continue to look at, monitor, and where we can still drive efficiency, make sure we're doing so. But central office took a cut but is there more there that we could? I don't know.
I think we'll continue to look at it. I want to address a couple of things just because publicly it's out there. You know, the orgs run in, so some of the 26 million you're talking about are coming straight from school accounts. So your point of like sending more to schools is what we're doing. We have gone outside to make sure that we are being efficient. It's not just our ideas. We're talking to other districts. I think what is difficult is you've got to understand is you can't just look at the central office line. You got to dig into it of what it is, because out of our 380 employees that are in central office, you know, close to 100 of those are in transportation or maintenance, right? And so our central office includes those positions where some other districts don't include those in central office. You know, we're going to be about 7% of our total staffing now in central office, which is well below the national average.
Okay. Commissioner Mackey, you have something real quick and we're going to close this now.
Yes, sir, Chairman, real quick. You know, you and I, we've heard people speak of running the schools as if they're a business. If a school is not producing, superintendent, but a handful of graduates, do you close the school?
That's not a short question, Dr. Mackey. I think that we've got to continue to look
I'll keep
at
it as a theoretical.
Right. I think we've got to continue to look at it. It goes back to Mr. Sharp's question of, you know, as a community, we have valued very small schools, and those schools are expensive to run. I mean, you're talking about comparing to like districts. When you look at Rutherford County just surpassed us in the number of kids in the district, and at one point had 20 less schools. I think now it's, you know, 15 less schools. And so there can be efficiencies, but that's a hard conversation. It's one that we have seen how hard it is with the elementary school that we're going to build on the DuPont site and be able to close to other elementaries, right? That was a really hard discussion, but those are the things that we've got to be willing to dig into and make sure that we are being as efficient as possible.
Yeah, I'm going to stay in my lane, but you were talking about trying to be everything to every student. Maybe you can.
I think, I mean, if the budget continues to do it, some of the things that we have and you know, Mr. Graham said gaslighting. I don't see it as gaslighting. Unfortunately, sometimes the Sunshine Law requires us to have really hard conversations in public. The reality is this budget, and I said it from the beginning, these are not superficial cuts. These are cuts that are hitting deep. And even though we've made cuts in the past, they're not cuts that the everyday person would have felt. And we're going to have some hard conversations. University High has been extremely successful. Our CTE programs have been extremely successful. We have other things that we've done really well that we don't have to do. And so as we get into future budget years, and if they are continuing to be this difficult, some of those conversations will have to happen in the future.
All right. Seeing no further lights, Dr. Robertson, again, thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
and doing the presentation. Each of the school board members, thank you for everything that you do. We are going to take about a 20-minute break and we'll come back for the mayor's presentation. So we will be back at 12:10. Thank you.
Okay. We've got some commissioners rolling back in, so we will start phase 2, which is the general county government budget. So we'll turn it over to Mayor and his team. So whoever was first, you got the mic.
All right. Today's going to be a team exercise of sorts. I'll get us started, and then Chief Roddy, Lee Browner, and then I'll come back up to close it out. I want to give some context for the timing of budget season and this presentation as it's been done over the last couple of years, and then in the many years preceding that, several of y'all have participated in budget presentations long before I got here. And I just wanted to reiterate that while we're open to how we can improve the timing and improve this collaboration between the various departments of county government and the county commission, that this does start earlier than it historically has. And that's a result of then Chairman Chip Baker asking us to present the budget earlier than had been the norm. And we went back and looked over the dates that Mayor Coppinger would typically introduce the budget in this same format, usually over at McDaniel. And we're somewhere, but it wasn't a fixed schedule, but we're somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks earlier in terms of presenting this budget than it has historically been presented. And as you all know, but the public should know, another change is that budget presentation day was always also budget book day. And a few years ago, we started the tradition of making the budget books available a few days in advance of the presentation, even though that was not the norm. And from now, we've got about 40 days to deliberate over this budget. And I want you all to know that on a one-on-one basis, we'll certainly invite all of you in, and finance is at your disposal. Chief Roddy, myself, Tucker McClendon in my office is very familiar with the budget. So depending on your questions, we've got over a month ahead of us here to deliberate on the budget. There's some commentary there at the end of Dr. Robertson's presentation about the county. I don't want to conflate the tightness of budgets with the overall welfare of the county. The county's in very strong positions, arguably in its strongest position that it's ever been. You can measure that in so many different ways. Unemployment is at record lows. There are difficult conversations being had about growth because we've had so much, and we continue to see robust growth. There are, as you all know, thousands and thousands of homes just in the county alone that have already been approved that will be built in the next few years. One thing that I'm particularly proud of that was referenced in Dr. Robertson's presentation there at the end is that as the state has tracked ready graduate rates, which is the combination percentage of our graduates who are ready either for college or a career, that number's gone up dramatically. But the introduction of a career and technical school downtown will mean that the students who attend schools with the lowest ready graduate rate, and that is a generalization, but it is generally true that the schools with the lowest ready graduate rate, according to the state, will soon have dedicated access to career and technical pathways. And I think you'll see those numbers rise increasingly over the next few years. And as a last point, it's not relevant to this budget year, but I did want to point out that there are ongoing conversations both with the school system and our office about corporate partnerships and the best models for career and technical schools, particularly ones that are in downtown environments like this one. And we anticipate we're already seeing so much interest, but we anticipate that corporate partnerships will significantly, if not entirely, fund the operations of that new school. Before I get started, I'd be remiss not to thank those who for months and months and months have put this budget together. Beverly Adams, who works closely with department heads, as well as Josephine Owino, are they're sort of those who do so much of the work and don't get the credit. You all certainly know Vonda, Patrick, and Lee Browner. What you may not know is that today is not just budget presentation day, but it is Lee Browner's birthday. Last nice thing I'm going to say about Lee is I kid y'all not, I work so closely with Lee. There's never been a time that Lee doesn't roll into the office where we don't enjoy seeing him come. He is a real gentleman and a delight to work with. I don't know who's got control of the slides. Is there? There we go. I've got control of the slides. Here we go. Key dates around the budget, some broad concepts within the budget we lay out the state of the county, and then there are hearings that you all have participated in. Budget books last Friday, budget presentation today. Give you a reminder of what the budgeted funds for the county look like. And then let's start here with what we see as the budget priorities that best describe the fiscal year 2026 budget. I'll start with the most costly single ticket items, which is, as Lee Browner described it, a measly 1% raise to employees. Part of the reason for our constraints is that we faced yet another significant increase in the cost of health insurance, which we have largely absorbed within the county budget. But we've also proposed a $750 one-time inflation adjustment for all full-time employees with the county. The exception is that we are going to work with our first responder partners, Sheriff's Office and EMS particularly, about that $750 that is spoken for in the budget being available to be plowed into their pay plans. We want to be sensitive, obviously, to what the market is, where we are in the market in terms of pay for first responders. And so while we see that as a conservative budget exercise for all of county government, the one-time supplement, we are going to work with both Sheriff's Office, EMS, and maybe some smaller agencies and departments within the county to make that, to give more flexibility to how they budget that $750. Overall, you'll see that in a year of modest revenue growth, most of the new revenue, the big increases in funding go to public safety. Again, Sheriff's Office seeing the largest increase, significant increase. We'll get to this here in a minute, to EMS. And a lot of this is just the cost of increased health insurance and modest pay changes. And then we've also carved out room for volunteer fire and expanded animal control services. As we've talked about on numerous occasions, we've been very diligent, deliberate in the way that we have sought to maximize the use of opioid settlement funds. A whole lot of people deserve credit. Really, that team led in many ways by Christy Cooper. And so this is the year that the overdose prevention team hits the road. And then it's sort of obvious given the conversations the last couple of years, but an important way to understand this budget is to know that this budget funds one of the, if not the largest investment in public school facilities in our county's history, design and construction of new schools, and significant deferred maintenance, $37.8 million of which has already been approved by this board. Big picture, you see $1.095 billion being the total for county government, the county budget this year. Of course, the lion's share of that goes to the school system. It's a larger percentage to the school system than it has been. About 2/3 of the county budget is public schools. You'll see year over year, only $3.1 million increase, just shy of that, $3.1 million increase in the budget of county general government. Obviously, you just heard from Dr. Robertson. This is a quick overlook of the school system's budget. One item to note in their budget, and this is really the driver of growth in the overall county budget. Lee Browner can speak to this with more specificity if you have questions, but where you see self-funded projects being a line that jumps significantly, those are bond-funded maintenance projects that find their way into their budget. They're shown in their budget as revenue and expenditure, even though they are also reflected in a different way in the county's budget. It's an interesting picture of Hamilton County School budgeted operations. This is only the operations of the school system over the last 10 years. You'll note that the school system's budget overall is up 65.7% over the last decade. Local funding for the public school system, that's just sales tax and property tax. Local funding for the public school system is up $100 million or 46.1%. Got a little bit ahead of myself. You'll see there that the increase in county general government is just under 1%. General fund revenues, the major changes that you'll see in revenues are increased projections in the collection of litigation taxes through the court system. Some of those are also fees. 2.4 million adjustment upwards in interest earnings, $1.5 million growth in state grants, and a $4.5 million decrease in federal grants, which is largely attributable to help funds not being available that were available last year. This one's a hard one to see on screen for the folks in the room, but this gives an idea of how the county budget is made up. This is something I'm often, this is county general government as we describe it, but I feel like I'm often explaining to people that we are heavily reliant on property taxes, more reliant on property taxes than our partners in city government or the small towns are, because we only collect sales tax in the unincorporated parts of the county. So 59% of the budget, property tax. And then expenditures by type. 37% of the county's budget is salaries, another 20% are employee benefits, purchase services, and transfers, the next two largest items. So just a breakdown of the largest operating costs of general government. The 1% across the board raise and the $750 one-time supplement comes at a cost of $2.6 million. The plans currently are for the county to absorb an additional $3.7 million in medical insurance costs. And so you'll see even across budgets as we get into division by division, and you'll see this in the line items of the budget, often you'll see an increase in a certain department and then realize that the vast majority of that increase is only the increase in pay and the increase in medical insurance costs. As we discussed last week and sent a broad overview to the commission, several months ago at the beginning of the year, we formed what we called the County Efficiency Task Force, which was a combination of leaders from across county government. Chief Roddy was very valuable in that. Nathan Janeway did a deep dive into some departments of the county that we found opportunities for efficiencies. Austin Cantrell from the auditor's office and Vonda Patrick brought a very valuable financial acumen. What we identified was total savings of $3.7 million. Several of the recommendations will require over the next few months or longer commission approval. And so not all 3.7 million of that is reflected in this budget, but a large portion of it is reflected in the budget, particularly where items, did not require formal county commission approval. Later today, we're going to send to commissioners a slide deck that was used to present exactly the recommendations of the efficiency task force. And so we use that slide deck that we'll share as a jumping off point to answer questions about this. And when we get together one-on-one, we're happy to clarify anything, but you'll be getting a breakdown of those recommendations later today. Obviously, right here is a very high level breakdown that refers to the freezing or elimination of 21 vacant positions, revisions to large contracts. We got creative and we're able to use a grant to acquire vehicles, which will reduce the cost of the county's master lease. And then cell phones and office supplies, we really turned over just about every stone and had great buy-in across county government in the process. Total cost of salaries, $123.8 million. Average salary is up to nearly $59,000. Median salaries, almost $55,000. You'll see a net reduction of 16 employees. One of the reasons for that is one of the areas where we identified an opportunity for significant efficiency is actually to add 6 maintenance positions within parks and bring in-house the landscaping and lawn care of properties across the county. That 1,937 number is significantly less. I was looking earlier today. My memory serves me, we were about 2010 or 2015 in fiscal year 23, which is the year that new commissioners came in. So the workforce is smaller than it was, but I think the services are being rendered every bit as well or better than they have been. Employee health benefits, it's kind of a staggering number. You stop and think about $38.1 million. I joked to Lee Browner that we might just be able to open up our own full service hospital at $38 million. That's not a serious proposal, but it is shocking how much money we spend on health benefits. But it is in many ways the leading benefit as we try to attract and retain very talented people to work in county government. And that's an increase of $3 million year over year. Capital outlays are thinner this year, but we also are going to have the opportunity to fund significant capital needs out of the large 2024 bond issue. The largest area of county government getting funding for capital needs is the sheriff's office. What you see there, the 1.6 million, that's enough to match the grant opportunity for replacement vehicles. The vehicle lease annually, you'll see, is always one of the largest capital items. And then the next 2 largest items are Parks and Recreation, where we slimmed it down to where these the big ticket items are ones that we share with the city, where there's an expectation that if we're taking the lead, which happens at Enterprise South, or if they're taking a lead on the lower portion of the River Park, or we're taking the lead on the upper portion, that we'll split capital costs. And then we carved out money for Highway Department heavy equipment and anticipate more investments out of bond proceeds and equipment for Brandon and his team to continue to do a great job. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Chief Operating Officer David Roddy.
Good afternoon, Commission. As you'll see in the slide, it's a basic breakdown of each of the main division areas within Hamilton County government, including unassigned, independent, and so forth. It's about, it shows in capital or highlights between each one of those what gets us to that roughly $3 million increase year over year. You'll see that there's increases in some and decreases in other. In the following slides, we'll get into those. But to Mayor Womp's point, we did stay consistent with a percentage increase for the Sheriff's Department and Public Safety, as well as Public Works, because we do understand from an entire community aspect, those are the parts of county government that affect the most and are also, with that low probability, high risk area of assessment, the ones that are most critical to support not only growth, but sustainment. You'll see in the next slide, the one thing we did this year in the budget is we eliminated the supported agencies division. Those are all the parts, NGOs, if you will, 3Cs that receive funding through Hamilton County government as well for how they support our county. We took those and broke those out into 4 different boxes between unassigned, Public Works, Health and Social Services, and Public Safety. That was better in line with what they did through their mission statement, but also parts of county government that align in the efforts, or at least the makeup. And you'll see in the unassigned division, it breaks out just as it is. It's a very eclectic group, everything from the Imagination Library to Regional Council of Government, Thrive, so forth. Next was Public Works. I think probably the one that kind of typifies what we're talking about there the most is the Hamilton County Fair, with Public Works having a sub area of it being Parks and Recreation. So it seemed to line up relative to the funding source because of the concentration collaborative approach between the two entities. Health and Social Services stayed consistent with that. As you can see, everything from the partnership to FJC. And then lastly, Public Safety being your volunteer emergency services agencies, your volunteer fire departments and rescues, as well as Forest Fire, Air, and Humane Education Society. The following slides in this reflect the increase in each one of those areas' budgets relative to the dollars that go to those supported agencies within those divisions. General fund expenditures, you'll see a 2.1% increase over last year, with the 4 leading ones of those being juvenile court judge, general sessions court, juvenile court detention unit, and the juries. The easiest one to explain is the increase of $118,000 in the juries, which was the increase on jury pay from $10 to $25 a day. And then the other ones roll up into different needs presented from the juvenile court judge. With a total of 53 full-time positions, the increase is primarily, and you're going to hear a consistent theme in this as Mayor Womp was talking about, is the incorporation of the 1% raise plus a $750 bonus, and then also adjustments for insurance premiums. Pretty much equals the balance that you see out to the right on the remaining 3. Is just the increases along each one of those items. There are some secondary that fill in the delta, which as we get into the granular parts of the budget, if you have questions of those, we can get into each one of those smaller line items. In the unassigned departments, you'll see an increase of 3.8%. That is spread across several larger areas, including debt service appropriation, emergency management. One of those line items in the 438 is 911 service increased its terms of contract requiring payment from all participating first responder entities, whether that was county or included municipalities. Everybody's cost to support 911 is going up in the coming year, and $270,000 of that 438 is indicative of that increase. You do have the supported agencies money, the 409, and then the ECD grant fusion ended. That's where you start to see some of your negatives drop off, as well as some capital projects transfers on the bond funds and the capital outlay. If you have any, there's some deeper numbers into that. I can dive into it, but I think your questions may take us to where you're trying to go, as opposed to me reading multiple bullet points below it. And some of those I will be in complete transparency. There's probably going to be a Lee Browner depth to that. So I'm not going to waste your time by reading bullets. We'll get Lee into the conversation if necessary. In the finance division, you'll see a 4.6% increase. Again, a lot of the increases you're seeing are a result of employee raises, bonus benefits, and your healthcare in costs or health insurance in cost, with one of the leading parts of that is a $241,000 increase for technology services, which is telecom and IT, as they have been previously referred to. Biggest part of that the 241 is to address network security. In light of recent activities, not only with us and other government entities across our community, state, and nation, we felt it was very much needed to make sure that we were providing enough technical support and funding to protect us from any type of network security risk. Your Public Works Division, you have a 5.9% increase. The majority of that, again, the same thing we were talking about earlier relative to raises and your health insurance increase, but also you have the drop in of some of the supported agencies that we were talking about relative to soil conservation, the county fair, and so forth, as well as you have 2.370, $2,370,000. But the majority of that is an increase related to state-funded road projects, which are 98% funded by the state. So that is a dollar amount that is set, but not all of that dollar amount is from a zero, if that makes sense. Health and Social Services, that number has gone down in an effort to make sure within not only the health department, but connected areas that we're paying attention to positions. You did have some of the monies coming up, same reason, raises in health insurance, and then also some of your supported agencies dropping within it. But when you eliminate 16 or freeze or eliminate 16 positions, as well as the termination of $2.7 million worth of federal grants at this time, it's resulted in just an 11.3% decrease. In your Human Resources Division, a 0.4 decrease of $9,000. One of the only real market increase across that was $120,000 with this. I'm sure this commission saw or participated in a lot of the activities relative to the expansion of our Veteran Service Court by appointing another Veteran Services officer within the budget. But then also we managed to save $184,000 in the revamping and structure of how the mailroom functions. To be very clear, those three positions, we did not terminate or lay off any county employees. Those employees were moved into vacant positions in other areas of county government because we valued how hard they worked for our county. Just the position that they were currently in within the mailroom, we felt that there was a more efficient process that we could begin to adapt and adopt relative to how mail is delivered across county government. So those three employees, while their positions were eliminated, those employees were retained by Hamilton County, and we're working through implementing a much more robust but efficient mailroom process for the county going forward, which is what resulted in a total decrease of $9,000 for the Human Resources Division. Public Safety Division, you have a 10.2 increase. As Mayor Wamp was talking about, we want to make sure that we do keep our public safety areas of county government funded as best we can and moving forward. Part of that, as you can see in the breakdown, is an overall amount of money headed into emergency medical services. We do have the continued opioid funds going into the EMS overdose prevention team and the EMS support of that new unit, which is the first of its kind in the state. And then below that, while drug recovery court support is not a component of the public safety division, they are a component that receives funding from opioid funds. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't leave them out of the overall county efforts from a fiduciary standpoint of making sure that we are using opioid funds to combat what's going on in our community and across the country. We do have some money set aside in an allocation to animal control services, which we can talk about farther in the presentation, and allocations to volunteer services agencies going towards not only your volunteer fire department, but your county rescue services as a secondary line of funding as we move into the budget year. We can give a further explanation of how that will happen and break down as well. And lastly, with the Sheriff's Department, we have a 4.1% increase. As you can see, the major changes is in correction services, information systems, criminal records unit, and facility maintenance. I would love to go into Sheriff Garrett's budget and intentionally get it wrong just to give Austin a hard day because I've been friends with Austin for a long time, but I'm not going to get into Sheriff Garrett's budget. I will let him speak to the nuances of that himself. And at this time, I will turn the presentation over to Lee Browner.
Next slide just shows a historical pattern or a fund balance over the last 10 years where you can kind of see where it's basically had some dips, mostly gone up this year. In fiscal year 25, we're expecting the fund balance to basically stay the same with a break-even results for 2025. Next slide is again another big picture that shows you debt service payments. This is basically based on our debt outstanding today and shows the payment schedule that we will have, assuming no new debt is issued. Key things to know right now at June 30th, 2025, we'll have $475.5 million of debt outstanding. The vast majority, or 70.3%, is based on school projects, funding for them. So, see anything else to cover? Yeah, well, the $475.5 million is how much debt will be outstanding at June 30th, of which 70.3% was issued for school-related projects. Keys to see, you can see that at least going forward, fiscal year 27's debt service is going to basically stay flat. You'll go down $820,000 next year, and then it's got a little bit of a dip of another $5.5 million the next year, where we'll get a little bit of room in fiscal year 28.
So when we were going through the big items that define the budget, I think it's easy to forget, because it's been the way that we've done things going back to Claude Ramsey's leadership and the county's lead role on school facilities. But the significant debt service that the county holds in our budget is not the norm across the state of Tennessee. Often we look to Knox County as a peer in many ways. We've learned a lot from each other over the years. Knox County is an example where virtually all school facilities, the debt service for those school facilities is funded through the school system's budget as a transfer back to general government, who is the only entity that can issue bonds. But I think we skip over the fact, even when we calculate or you see estimations of school funding or per student funding, what is not included in that is that county general government covers out of our budget debt service on large school projects. And this county's done a good job for a long time building new schools. Still got a lot of work to do. But you talk about, really the biggest change in this budget is debt service, and it's one of the most significant commitments that we've made here. But I don't know that the public, particularly in conversations around public education funding, recognizes that in this county, we are quite unusual in that county general government foots the bill for major school facility upgrades, namely the construction or renovation of school projects. Wanted to give you guys an update as we begin to talk about hotel motel tax, an update on the South Broad project and its impact to future budgets. While we were proud to have renegotiated components of that stadium deal that will limit the county's exposure over decades, one of the challenges is that it is a debt-financed project, and taxpayers split evenly between the city and county are going to have to cover any shortfall. You all may remember, and we're happy to recirculate this, you may remember that a group out of West Tennessee, Younger and Associates, put together 50-plus page documents and revised them early last year. These are documents that show a build-out schedule, that show the projections for when tax increment comes on board. So we're now to the point, just given the timeline of construction projects, where we can begin to make some estimates of the shortfall that we are going to see. I don't think the city will deny that we're now confronting a reality where there will be shortfall. One way that I would quantify this to y'all is in those younger studies, which were the underpinning financial model for the stadium, there was 1.9 million square feet of commercially assessed property that was projected for the site. Of course, that's in addition to, we're talking about the site itself, not talking about the surrounding TIF area. And so you can drive by and see that the stadium is well underway, but the other developments have not taken place. Based on that younger study, which is our most detailed way of understanding how the increment will flow, in 2026, now in that study, to be fair, that analysis is based on calendar years, not fiscal years. But in 2026, we should see out of the ground and on the tax books, a couple 100,000 square feet of commercial development. I don't think there's any way that's possible. None of it has broken ground. And then in fiscal year 27, you're supposed to have north of 600,000 square feet of commercial. And I'm just talking office and retail. When I say commercially assessed, there's also large-scale townhomes and other developments that are supposed to be taking place. And so there's no way to know exactly. I would say when you look out at fiscal year 28, which is when the first full debt service bill hits the city and county based on the very modest growth in that TIF since it started counting. It actually started counting in 2021. You get to go set the clock back retroactively. There's been very modest growth in the entire TIF. And I think we'd be wise to plan for about 1.5 million of shortfall that will come to both the city and the county. Now, as was discussed when the stadium came forward, stadiums and the debt service connected to stadiums cannot be funded with property taxes, but they can be funded through hotel motel tax. And so it is our strong recommendation that we begin to set aside hotel motel tax for what is likely to be years of debt service shortfalls. We certainly don't want to pull it from fund balance. At least I would prefer that not be the approach we take. And this is part of a broader realignment of how we fund hotel motel tax dollars. You'll see right here, summary of the collections of hotel motel funds. Another area in which our county is very unusual is that the county has foot the bill almost entirely for tourism marketing. Of course, the vast majority of that tourism marketing and the funds benefit, the benefit of the funds is in the city of Chattanooga. We said a couple years ago in our first budget presentation that we really would like to move towards a split. We want to be supportive with our hotel motel funds of tourism, continued tourism, but as these funds have grown, I don't think it doesn't make sense any longer that the county funds almost exclusively that we fund almost exclusively tourism marketing. That should be split. One of the byproducts of the current arrangement is that the city is able to pursue capital projects and parks projects, fund a whole variety of different things. I think they certainly will plan to use their hotel motel tax funds on debt service needs for the stadium. The county's not had that same opportunity due to a resolution that we revised a couple years ago, allowing the county to withhold some funds. And we want to continue specifically to invest and build momentum investing in youth sports facilities, which we think have been overlooked, but have a very significant economic impact to our region. I'll say over the next few weeks, I intend to bring alongside the budget a resolution that will provide additional clarity to the county's position on funding the tourism company over the next few years. I want this to be a collaboration, working partnership. We started by holding them at the same level a couple years ago. The city of Chattanooga has begun funding Chattanooga tourism in a modest manner. And so rather than pulling the rug out from under the city or the tourism company, we don't want this to be likened to the end of the sales tax agreement in the Littlefield Coppinger days. That was a very difficult moment in city-county relations. What we would prefer to do is bring to y'all alongside the budget a multi-year plan for a step down in funding so that the city and county can be partners in funding tourism marketing in the years ahead. And then the last thing that I want to introduce is a concept I've had the opportunity to discuss with a few of y'all. And it is our intent over the next few months to consider a budgeting practice that is, we would be emulating a budget practice of the state of Tennessee. I'll say it that way. This is something I've talked to Bo Watson about. We call the concept a reversionary budget amendment. I believe that this would allow us to ensure the maximum use of tax dollars. Basically, the concept that we propose is that when the books are closed over the next few months on fiscal year 2025, if there is a surplus, instead of that surplus by default going back into fund balance, that we would capture a portion of that, budget it into fiscal year 2026 in order to fund important one-time projects that were not funded in this budget. And there is a small partnership with Carter reflected in the budget, but we are open to further capital funding. We see that as being possible, but we want to be very cautious and close the books out on fiscal year 2025 before making any assumptions. We also anticipate there'd be other capital needs across the county that could be funded. To be clear, this is I'll describe it as a simplified county version of a state budgeting practice. The way that they do budget reversions is they actually budget in advance. And I'll use as an example, I'll pick a department head or an administrator. I'll pick Todd Lehman. So the way the state does budget reversions is their budget team in a very sophisticated way would project that county public works in fiscal year 26 is only going to spend 90% of its budgeted revenue. So we think only 90% of the expenditures through public works are going to be actually spent. And so we're going to take the other 10% and budget them into one-time or proactively place a certain amount of money into the rainy day fund. That is a very sophisticated exercise. The simplified and more conservative approach that we would propose is that we come back in a few months, having closed the books on 2025, and let's just say for the sake of round numbers, that there's $1 million that was unspent in the fiscal year 2025 budget. Given the state of the county's fund balance, which we discussed last week, it's very high by any best practices standard. Instead of allowing those funds that, and again, we don't know what that number will be, but for the sake of argument, let's say it's $1 million, we may say we'll put 200,000 of it into fund balance, and then we'll take the other 800,000 and fund priorities of county commissioners and others who'd requested one-time funding. We think that would be a practice that will best serve those who've asked the county for money that we were not able to allocate in this budget, but also at a time where fund balance or the rainy day fund is so high, we feel like it would be appropriate to aggressively budget every dollar that's in the county budget to provide as many services and meet as many needs as possible. Next step, of course, will be a vote for the adoption of this fiscal year 2026 budget. We'll work with you all on when that will take place. And for those of you who are headed to Gatlinburg, we wish you a safe trip.
Hey,
All right. Now, and the last thing I'll say here, because it's, it is, you know, you guys got budget books on Friday. I don't think all of you were able to pick them up. There are a million questions that could be asked. Public budgeting is wonky. And so I don't know how y'all are on time. We're open to answering a few questions here, but we want to be real clear. Well, we want to be real clear that you know.
I think each one up here has got 20 or 30 questions.
There you go. We've got over a month, and we are happy to take as much time as possible or as is necessary to meet and go through any of the specific questions you have about the proposed budget.
I will say this, I appreciate the book. I know Sheila stayed a lot of hours and put in the book, but there's also other people there involved. Beverly Adams, who does a great job in finance. Josephine does an outstanding job. So I want to make sure, Lee, we really got to appreciate them, and because they're behind the scenes, they're not here, they're behind the scenes, and they work hard day in and day out to get this together for us. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
Thanks, sir. So, Mr. Mayor, I know you mentioned the opportunities over the next 4 to 5 weeks before we actually take that vote. And one of those that you started early on, I was going to mention you'd already did about the one-on-ones. Is that something your office intends to reach out to each commissioner to set that time? Are they, okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah, our preference will be starting today that we'll schedule time sooner than later to meet so that I would like for those meetings to take place on a timeline where we've left still weeks before a budget vote. So my preference would be that we'll start scheduling those meetings today and try to schedule them. If we've got roughly 5 weeks until a budget vote, that we would try to knock those meetings out within the next 2.5 weeks, so that we've got a couple weeks even on the other side of one-on-one meetings to work through any issues.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Baker?
Thanks, sir. Lee, just a quick question. It seems to me that we've got capital funds in an operating budget. Is our practice not, I guess what I'm asking is, do we have a capital budget needs list that doesn't mix with operating funds? Like, we talked about some IT stuff and some other things in here, and I was like, huh?
Yeah, we do a 5-year capital plan that kind of tries to look out in the future. It's very difficult because government, as you know, we kind of go on a 12-month cycle, 12 months to 12 months. But yes, we do have a bigger picture 5-year capital plan that is developed every year or developed and updated each year.
Can we get
Well,
a copy of that?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and the amounts that we've got in, basically in here is historically the shorter term capital items such as vehicles, shorter term heavy duty equipment. We budget for those type of capital items in the operating budget. And they've always have been under the category capital outlay.
And I guess this might be a mayor question, but have we looked at like CARTA being able to combine our maintenance services with them, or being, seeing if there's a way to take the economies of scale of what they're doing and what we need, and maybe come up with an ability to, maybe get better efficiencies?
We can look at that for sure.
Okay.
I think it may have been a better question for David Roddy, but I think that's something we certainly could look at across fleets to see if there are some efficiencies. I do know that was a part of our efficiency task force exercise as we looked into where some vehicles were being serviced to see if there was a better approach.
Okay. And then also, I'd like to see a roads and sewer plan, just because that's,
I think
with
you ought to be
$500 million of sewers out there, we
I
got
think
to
that's
figure out how
a
to
subcommittee for you to co-chair.
No, I think
We'll-
that's you.
We'll work with you on it. I do think it'd be helpful to have a longer term picture on capital needs.
Okay. Then one other question. I get this reversionary budget approach. I just rather we budget, and if we don't, because we go into our rainy day fund, only when we need to, but, in fact, I think that's what we're doing our roads budget this year. But, I just personally like to see us budget, use excess, goes back into a fund that we can draw on if we need to, that we all agree to. So just my philosophical approach. All right, thank you.
No, I'm glad you guys are talking about like long-range planning and put money aside. I think that's something we talked about. I know Mr. Janeway's not with us, I don't think. But that's something we talked about at that meeting we had at the chamber, is looking 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years out. What are we putting aside for those projects, and to get ready for them? So I think that's something we just got to figure out, how to do it, and and set up those. Commissioner Shipley?
I don't know if I heard it right, but the debt service we might pay on the stadium or the shortfall. What was it, $1.2 million there a minute ago? So I didn't remember it being that much back when we did that. I do remember Commissioner Graham telling us how that money would have to be paid out of something besides property tax.
Yes, sir. And again, there are a whole lot of what ifs involved here because it depends on the growth. It depends on the revenues generated at the stadium, assuming it opens next year as planned, or sometime during next year, I believe is still the plan. But yeah, and it depends on the infrastructure growth, the building growth, everything that's happening out there. But the gist of it is on the original $80 million bond issue, because there were some other debt, there's also another, I think it was a $30 million piece that the city of Chattanooga is solely the backup for, and another $5 million piece. But on the original $80 million piece, if the growth is not sufficient to cover that, Hamilton County and the city of Chattanooga will 50-50 split whatever's needed to cover the debt service. Again, it looks now that there's a pretty good possibility that in years 1 or 2 of that, we may end up having to, Hamilton County and the city may end up having to provide funding to cover that debt service, but it's really hard to say right now how much it would be.
I think that was planned already. I think originally, if I remember right, it
I
was,
didn't remember it being that much.
it was 3 million originally. And where the county would do $1.5 million and the city would do $1.5 million. So I think we're talking about something from a year or so ago. So
Yeah, and I just.
That's
I think it's the same as what we talked about
Lee
originally.
Browner's saying that's not the same as that $1.5 million that was budgeted up front. A different perspective. I didn't go into the
So $1.5 million is $1.5 million though, right? Because they said $1.5 million, because it's 3 million originally. With the first year shortfall would be 3 million. So what we estimated. And of course, these are a lot of what Lee calls what ifs. So.
If I can speak real quickly to that, those first couple of years is where we actually just capitalized interest because we knew we were not going to have sufficient growth there.
Right.
And so that was built in that basically we would issue enough debt to cover the capitalized interest for years 1 and 2. The original plans that we had showed basically by year 3, they're at least based on the projections that the younger group had, that there would be sufficient debt or sufficient growth to cover the debt service. Again, and there still may be, it's still early to tell, but right now, we just want to make sure that y'all are aware that there is that potential that there may be a shortfall, but it was never intended that the county would need, city and county would need to, the growth was supposed to cover all that.
Right. I think it's for the South Broad and also the Bend. They had some questions about it. So.
Yeah. Well, one quick clarification on that front. First of all, the Bend, we will have no shortfall on because the county is not responsible for any debt at the Bend. But the annual debt service payment on the stadium, just so everybody's clear about this, annual debt service payment on the stadium is going to be $5.5 million beginning in fiscal year 2028. It's lower than that in fiscal year 27 and fiscal year 26. But the long-term annual debt service payment for the stadium is $5.5 million. There's $1 million lease. $1 million lease takes you down to $4.5 million. And then there is projected to be $890,000 annually of sales tax, which the state is allowing to be put towards debt service. Part of what I wanted to share with you all is the way that the TIF was structured was that all growth in the entire TIF area, so this is beyond just the stadium site or just the Wheeling site, but it's that larger tract. The way this was structured is that we're able to capture growth in the TIF area starting in 2021. So if you look at 2021 until now, 2025, there's been growth over those 4 years of $423,000 that we can use towards the TIF. So in 4 years, we've grown 623,000. And if the sales tax numbers wind up like they're supposed to, let's see, lease is paid, sales tax is what it's supposed to be. There's still $3.5 million between the city and county. And it's due every year, 3.6 million. Now the projections, this reason and I'll send back around the Younger study, but it's a reason that on the one hand, these were all numbers. On the other hand, they were buildings that we had to see come out of the ground in a timely manner. And it takes, to build a large scale commercial project, it takes a fairly predictable amount of time. And so I just want to signal to everybody that we should be withholding money. It's not an issue. Finance Chairman Ken Smith would be more familiar than I am. This is not so much an issue for the city of Chattanooga, in part because they have reserves, hotel motel reserves of $7 million. They've been holding back some hotel motel tax in a fund, much like many of our funds have an accumulated fund balance. Since we don't have a significant hotel motel fund balance, part of what I'm here to say is we need to begin building one for a variety of different reasons. Long term, let's invest in youth sports, but short term, it's very unlikely if over the last 4 years, we're only seeing 623,000 of growth that's tax increment and that's city and county combined. That's not just the county side, the city and county combined. That means we got to grow another 3 million in the next two, but we've only grown 623,000 in that TIF area over the last two. I don't doubt that at some point out in the future, this all catches up, but we are at a point now where the trustee's office has been tracking for us parcels that are coming online. That's how we have those estimated numbers. And we've compared notes with the city of Chattanooga. And I just want to be clear as we do long-term budgeting, because like I said, we're going to bring a resolution that speaks to longer-term plans with regard to hotel motel tax and how we allocate it, that we'd be wise to build a fund balance in our hotel motel fund.
Commissioner Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, I think you just basically answered my question, but I was curious. There was a program, and maybe this is a question for Lee, but there was a program that the state was allowing the sales tax from the stadium. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a 30-year program that the state's going to allow the sales tax from that stadium to revert back to the stadium. They were doing that to get ball stadiums built within the state. Is that correct? And did we make it?
Yes, the program is in effect, and right now, at least based on the Younger study, the thought would be that those sales tax proceeds would provide about $890,000 toward covering per year toward covering the debt of the stadium corporation.
And that was a conservative number, right?
We did not work on those numbers, but yeah, there were several numbers or several parties, Younger, the Lookouts, but the county was not involved in projecting how much proceeds would be coming now. So I don't know if it was conservative or not.
I'm in total agreement. I think that we should have it could be, and you're the finance guy, but it could be included in our regular fund balance, but line item to where, if the state will allow us to do this, we're at line item the hotel motel tax to where it's set aside for those O's. And like the mayor just said, for projects like youth sports related or whatever within our districts that meet the criteria of the hotel motel tax, correct?
Yes, sir. And that's basically what we're doing now. Prior to a couple of years ago, the hotel motel tax or that fund was just by definition or by resolution by the commission, it was just an in and out. All 100% of taxes that came in were dispersed out to, at the time, the CVB. Now it's the Chattanooga Tourism Company. But so we have changed that now. And yes, we are using some of the hotel motel tax is being held in a fund that would be retained and, or could be retained and could be used for any debt that may come up related to Stadium
Well, I agree
Corporation.
with that 100%. I also agree that, that us working towards, sooner than later, working towards the city and us working towards a strategy where we're equal partners in that hotel motel tax spending, to where we're equal partners, because that's only, not only fair, but I was here when the Littlefield administration let the sales tax expire. I was here and I worked on that committee. I was here to see that expiration of the sales tax agreement, and it was devastating, to say the least. It was devastating to I think we had to, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like 35 or 36 different departments or 501c3s that were helping the county do services that we had to just literally cut loose. And we had a very, very difficult financial year that year as well. So I think us taking a better approach, easing into it instead of just ripping the Band-Aid off, I think is a much better approach. Thank you for doing that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for suggesting that. No, nothing further.
Mr. Sharp?
Thank you, Chairman. I just have two little things. Lee, I know now, as of not this past legislative session, but the one before, the comptroller now requires us to submit our hotel motel tax dollar expenditures for review. Have we done that? And do we know, have our expenditures met the criteria required by the comptroller's office?
Basically, that law just passed last year, and we've had one filing of that. And yes, we did meet that criteria. This year going forward, we have not, that report's not due until the end of the fiscal year, but I will tell you, we have met it. And I will tell you, based on our private act setting up our hotel motel tax, all monies have to be used for tourism-related activities already. So I would be very surprised and disappointed if we do not, in any year going forward, this year coming up and future years, if we do not meet the requirements of the comptroller.
That's good to hear. Was that the 81 Act?
Well, it's not, it was a private act that I believe 1981 was where we initially set up our hotel motel tax.
Okay.
So we set
That's what
ours
I was
up
thinking.
prior to the state doing a statewide tax. So we've been, our,
That was for the Roundhouse, the UTC Arena,
yes,
Right.
that and among other things.
among a couple other things.
Yes.
What, so one other thing that stood out to me, I believe it's we're going to pay $59 million in debt service this coming year in this next budget. Is that right? 59 million? Is that right?
I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that number does seem, that is the amount, I believe, that the general fund is going to be, well, no, that is the amount of debt service. The general fund will be transferring over $56 million to help cover that. And our plan for this year is to use $3 million of the debt service fund in this year's budget.
Which is kind of like the rainy day fund for debt service. Is that what that is, or?
Basically, yes, the debt service fund has right now a fund balance of $8 million. Assuming this budget is approved, I would expect next year, well, I would expect we would be using $3 million of that $8 million fund balance in the debt service fund
In next year's budget?
in fiscal year 26's budget, correct?
Okay. And out of that 59 million, how much of that is interest?
Yeah. If you want, we could, Vonda's looking up that number and I'll get that to you within a couple of minutes or shorter, I would assume.
That will be fine. Thank you.
Okay. Couple questions real quick, because I was seeing more lights. Doge, thank you for the committee you put together working on that. Just a couple observations. Salaries, wages, I guess, if I remember right, it's like 3.7, if I remember right, savings. Is that current open positions that are going to remain open?
$3.7 million number was contracts, reductions in office supplies. That was everything all together. I think about closer to half of that number was the value associated with positions and benefits with those positions.
But we're not losing anybody, because I know we shifted 3 from the mailroom to other county positions.
That's
that
right,
were-
yeah.
So if we're not losing anybody, we're just not going to fill open positions.
Well, you'll see that it looks different in every one of the divisions of county government. And as I mentioned to you the other day, this was a process where we involved every administrator. And so I'd say in each division where there was an adjustment or elimination or freezing of position, those were dictated on terms that the various division administrators were comfortable with. And we engaged all of the administrators early in the process so that they knew there was flexibility. This was not meant to be a harmful exercise, but one that actually gave them more flexibility. So there were some circumstances in which we actually used reductions in positions to increase compensation in other positions so that they could be, so that they would basically be more marketable. So I'd say the answer to your question is a hybrid, but they're positions that were identified as not being filled now, with the exception of the mailroom, and those folks were transitioned. But then you've also got some efficiency pursuits the county's been on. For example, the closure of the Soddy Daisy Health Clinic is an example where you find savings, but you've still got people shifting into other roles within the health department.
So in short words, no one's losing their job. So no one's losing, because that's, you and I kind of talked about it.
Yeah.
We just don't want the perception to be out there, we're layoffs. That is
No, we
not
tried to,
happening.
that's right. We tried to be
We're
very,
not laying off people.
yeah, well, fair enough. We tried to be very
So-
clear when we started the process that layoffs were not anticipated, nor were they the goal. I was told by our team that they feel like even those in the mailroom who ended up in new roles or who are moving towards new roles, there'll be probably better roles with a better pathway. But I mean, to that question, I appreciate that question and clarification, in part because we saw, I don't know what led to this. I guess it was us talking to the media about these freezings. We use the words freeze and elimination, and we were very clear when we talked to the media last week that there would be no layoffs. Yet there was still a push notification by the Times Free Press that referenced job cuts, and we were very disappointed because they knew that was not true. But I do think that's probably more clickable than there not being layoffs, and that was frustrating. One other thing that I'll just mention, I appreciate the opportunity to clarify a couple things. Even our concept of a reversionary budget, which we can talk to you all about, it's something, again, Senator Watson has helped me understand how the state squeezes as much juice out of the orange. Let me be extremely clear that this budget is coming to y'all without a recommendation for a tax increase. And if we were to come back in a few months in collaboration with y'all and try to fund some one-time projects, that too would all be funded without a tax increase. I just want to be clear that if we pursue that, when we come back around, it would only be allocating unspent funds from a previous fiscal year.
Lease vehicles, one of the things you talk about in Doge as far as lease vehicles. Have we gone through the list of vehicles to see who has one? Do they need one? Do we find any vehicles that are not being utilized that we can go ahead and turn back in? Because I guess a year and a half ago, we did an exercise and there were a lot of county vehicles out there. Most are on the road, some are not. So have we gone through and looked at that pretty extensively?
That is an ongoing process, and we believe, I was talking to Gerald Carpenter about this a couple weeks ago, we believe that we can collect data in a way that better informs us in a timely manner of cars that are being underutilized. To answer your question directly, we reduced the county fleet by 7 vehicles through this efficiency task force. So we were able to either identify underused or unused vehicles or pool vehicles that could be shared more broadly. 7 vehicles were turned back in. We tried to limit that efficiency task force exercise to our domain in general government, sheriff, through the protocols established by the county, but the sheriff has made decisions about which of his non-sworn folks would have vehicles. So we didn't speak into, even just you asking a question about, judgment calls on who gets vehicles. We feel pretty good about county general government who has vehicles and take-home vehicles. Don't feel like that's my role to speak for other constitutional officers. But we did, that was part of the review. And we feel like we both, found savings in terms of turn vehicles in, but then also longer term, over the next several years, there's going to be savings through utilization of this grant program.
I would just ask is if it's not been already a deep dive into those vehicles, because you'll be amazed at what you can find. And it's pretty expensive, especially you attach a fuel card and then you got maintenance on top of that. So, which is tires and all, that can be pretty expensive per vehicle. So that will be a good list to scrub. So, I did not realize as I was going through the budget, I spent a lot of time in the budget this weekend. Commissioner Shipley, I don't know if you were aware of it, but McDonald Farm, we spend a lot of time in the past talking about it, hadn't recently, but it's cost us over $300,000 a year just to maintain that farm. And that's not, has nothing to do with the fair. So we just need to make sure we're watching that thing, because it's, what's the pathway and where we're going with it. So it would be my ask. So Commissioner Sharp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. That, I turned my light back on because I guess maybe I just got a little more confused. So we've not cut any positions, but we saved money. I'm not sure that I follow that. On the $3 million that we're talking about there. Could you explain that like in just a few words?
It's not a few $1 million. I clarified that part. 3.7 is everything combined. About half of that is related to positions. I explained a lot of it, and I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one to explain how the elimination of positions creates savings.
Is it just the unfilled positions? Is that the question? I'm just curious because those are dollars that typically we would put in the fund balance at the end of the year if they've never were filled.
Well, not if they were filled for a few months and then there was time and effort spent trying to fill it again. And so it was a much more comprehensive effort than I think what you're describing.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can talk about it later. I'd appreciate that. Lee, did we ever find that number?
Yes, sir. The debt service, principal and interest payments in fiscal year 26 will be $59,086,550, of which $22,631,000 will be interest on that debt. And again, we historically pay our debt off quickly. It's a big number, but our principal repayment will be $36,455,000.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mackey.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I have that. Chair, I've sat through several, well, quite a few budget hearings. And I must say that this commission is one that the residents of Hamilton County should be really proud about, because as everyone here have listened to the questions and have held this administration's feet to the fire, the residents of Hamilton County ought to feel pretty doggone good that the mayor and his staff is getting every drop of juice from the orange. And so I hope we keep it up. And this is not adversarial. It's about being accountable. And when we take people's tax money, we want everything we can get for that money. Thank you, Chair.
All right, we have no further lights. So, Mr. Mayor, Lee, Chief, thank you very much for the presentation. With that, we will close the last presentation on the budget, and we look forward to the next 4 or 5 weeks getting together with the staff and getting any additional questions answered. So with that, everybody, thank you. We're adjourned.